So we're living in an increasingly juiced up culture where more, bigger, better is what it's all about, right? You gotta pack on that muscle. You gotta do whatever it takes to get it. In terms of martial arts, you gotta be the baddest dude in the room. But we overlook some, I think, critical elements of performance when we only focus on concrete metrics, right? So, one of the elements of what we might call like the warrior's training arc, and this will be counterintuitive to people that don't have a lot of time in the game or have been unwilling to maybe delve deeper into what's behind their training, let's say. And that's not, I don't want that to seem condescending, it might, but look, a lot of people believe that you need to feel wrecked when you leave the gym. A lot of people believe that it's good to feel sore for several days on end because you've done the right kind of work. These are not good metrics for either strength training or general, technical development. They're just not. There's no evidence for that being the case. But one of the issues is that the better that one gets in a craft, let's pick martial arts for this case, but it works in general across the mind-body spectrum, right? Is that the domain is no longer about training, it's about life. And in the case of martial arts, it's about combat or self-defense. But what happens is the psychology gets so attuned to that feeling of fatigue and then consequent soreness or an inability to perform at the same level. We start to accept those cycles of super high intensity and then we're blown out for a couple of days, right? Unless you're living that Shaolin or Thai boxing lifestyle where literally you've conditioned yourself to train at that level every day of the week, and training is life, life is training, no problem. And I've lived like that myself a couple times. I've trained Thai boxing in Thailand. I've trained with Shaolin warrior monks. And at times, you put yourself in those environments where that's just the game, right? You do the work and it's 5 hours a day of training every day for however long you're willing to subject yourself to the insanity. But the warrior psychology is not one of constantly doing more to be better and better at those things that are supposed to supplement or complement their art and craft. It's readiness, right? The true benefit of training is that it prepares you for the outside. It prepares you for life in the case of mind-body development. Martial art prepares you for combat, self-defense, and for that, are you going to be better off if you feel fresh, relaxed, healed up and rested, or if you feel sore as shit and you can barely lift your leg off the ground, right? And this is, in a way, it's an immature perspective of the training process because a lot of people still, even into their 30s, 40s, 50s, will wreck themselves in the gym. And while we do need a phase like that for basic conditioning, in the weightlessness process, there are 3 stages of what I would consider the conditioning phase of weightlessness training. And stage 3 is quite advanced. People that graduate that stage, they look and feel awesome. I mean, it's an aggressive stage in terms of the meditative metrics, the strength metrics, flexibility metrics. It's no joke. And people have a hard time passing all 3. Then we've got a higher level of training, which is more qualitative, lightness training, right? But as we progress, this arc looks something, if you're looking at the Y and the X axis from your perspective here, a lot of people think training looks like this. But if you're looking at the intensity of the conditioning phase and the strength phase, it ought to look like this. Okay? And the reason for that is twofold. One, priorities should change. We're no longer trainees. We got to be able to perform. We are in the game now, and the game is life. I need to be ready for shit outside of the gym. And if I destroy myself all the time, well, that impedes my ability to be ready and to perform at a high degree. The second factor is there's an inverse relationship between intensity and recovery, and intensity and duration of training, right? So on both of these counts, the greater the intensity of the workout, the shorter the workout must be, and the longer you're going to need to recover from it. Unless you understand periodization and are able to program effectively so that you're able to train more, doing less damage holistically, right? But what might this look like for somebody that is now training? So a lot of people are finding their strength and conditioning routines, they're getting them from bodybuilders. A lot of people are, and they're reading what those guys in the movies are doing, and they're saying, oh, I got to do 4 sets of 12 reps, but I got to do 3 different exercises for the muscle groups. So if I'm doing pull on this day, well then I got to do lat pull down or pull ups, plus I got to do rows, plus maybe I got to do bicep curls. And the amount of volume that most people are taking on is way excessive for somebody that needs to perform within any given time. And if you're not concerned with performance, what's the game that you're playing? Is your focus just lifting weights? Because, I mean, you gotta pick your game, right? If you want to be a bodybuilder, that's fantastic. I've got a lot of respect for bodybuilding with the work and the focus that they have. It's fantastic, but it's not everybody's game to be as big and strong as possible, be as lean as possible. And so we got to find that balance between what happens when we leave the gym. So, as I was saying, bodybuilding routine. Not going to be effective for most people that are not, first of all, juicing. If somebody's juicing, it is going to dramatically impact the quality of muscle that they build in the period of time that they build it, right? And you just can't replicate that. People, and there are plenty of studies, you check them out, but people build more muscle sometimes taking steroids and doing nothing than people that are hitting the gym 3 days a week and, you know, making sure that they're doing all those things, getting the nutrition on point and the rest, et cetera, et cetera. Insane that that is even possible. And there are people that claim you still got to do the work. Yeah, okay, you do. But look, this is super soldier serum stuff. I mean, it does incredible, incredible things. If you're not on that stuff, you're going to need more time to recover. Your body's not going to be able to handle the same volume of work. Unless, of course, it's your lifestyle and you're fully committed. If you're getting those 8 to 10 hours of rest a day, every meal is on point, and you are programming effectively, and you understand what you're doing, you might be able to make it work. But then you have to add in the other stuff. If you're a martial artist, well, what about your technical training? Well, what about the need to be able to perform outside of both of these training regimes? So there's just a lot of complexity going on. Okay, so look, in weightlessness training, the first 3 stages of the weightlessness process, which is what I coach remotely, and we rarely get into lightness training, but just the conditioning phase. First phase, level 1 focuses on structural conditioning, meaning that we're working in the range of kind of bodybuilding reps, but not sets. So somebody might be doing, 4 to 5 sets of 10 to 12 reps. That's not a lot of weight. You will get hypertrophy from this, but the main premise is how do we make sure that your structure is sound enough to be able to apply heavier loads and build up over time. So in that rep range, it's unlikely you're going to get seriously injured from training, right? That's not the objective, it's just foundational training. So while some think the bodybuilding sets and reps are ideal, for growth and adaptation, it's true, but in weightlessness, that's foundational training, right? We're more looking for the structural adaptations that come from it. Second stage, we might say high intensity or cardiovascular type training. We're trying to prime our cardiovascular system to be able to generate energy faster, burn fat faster, get us so that we can start to move ballistically, et cetera, et cetera. Level 3, we're looking at limit strength. And so that's where we're getting to the heavier types of weight training, looking at the deadlift as a focal point, the weighted dips, pull-ups, et cetera, those core movements that everybody's familiar with. But the volume at level 3 compared to level 2 is significantly less, right? Intensity is way up because we are now doing what you call limit strength, right? Your max efforts, what you can do in a 3 to 5 rep range, maybe even a 1 to 3 rep range in some cases. By definition, it's the most intense form of exercise. If you can't do it more than once, it's by definition intense, right? This is phenomenal for improving the strength of connective tissues, for making sure that your CNS, your central nervous system is, triggered properly and you're working on those full body power moves. It's going to prepare you for higher level athletic work, right? The types of stuff where if you're a fighter, to take and give impact, to move ballistically, to have a better strength to weight ratio, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to recruit more fast twitch muscle fiber than you would with a high intensity type of program doing higher reps. But you can't do a lot of it. If you try to do too much, you're going to burn out. You're going to be sore for days. You're not going to be able to get back in the gym as quickly, so on and so forth. So that arc looks like this. A certain amount of volume, not a lot of sets, but a good number of reps. Increase in the volume of training to activate not just fast twitch muscle fiber recruitment, but also to work into that high intensity domain and those cardiovascular adaptations. And then we start to curtail that now, maintain those other aspects with less work so that we can start to move into some of the performance aspects and conversations. Inversely, meditation looks like this as we're progressing. In the beginning, it's not very fruitful to put a lot of time into it. If you're already not physically conditioned, if the diet's not on point, if you've got no flexibility, there are other things that we need to achieve before we can start to have a high level of mind-muscle connection, coordination, introspection, or interoception, feeling within the body. these things get augmented through strength and flexibility training, right? And they take time. And the more meditation we do, the more we can do. It's not like that with high tension strength training. So the warrior mentality, the warrior arc, should look like this. And this is hard for people. I've even coached guys that came in with a great level of fitness training. They had the hardest time when I said, we got to do a lot less work. It sounded counterintuitive. And I said, look, you got to trust me for this, because this is not just you going to the gym doing your thing. We're trying to develop other skills. We've got a variety of tools we're trying to incorporate, including the flexibility, the meditation, other types of movement skills, maybe even a little bit of martial arts. And if we keep at this volume, we're not going to achieve anything else, and it's going to slow you down. So he didn't believe me at first, but he said, okay, we'll go for it. The volume was probably a third to half of what he was used to. And he did not believe that he would make progress on that much volume. But we were able to increase the intensity. We were able to increase the load that he was applying, the weight that he was putting into each exercise. And within that, over time, the volume of work was a lot less. We only needed maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes of conditioning at that level, instead of maybe the 50 minutes that he might have had at earlier stages, which gave us a lot of time for the other pillars of training. And then after 3 months, all of his metrics improved. All of them did. And he couldn't believe it. All of his strength metrics improved across the board. And we were doing less work in half the time, right? So this is one of those case in points where you got to understand and apply the theories behind it long enough to see the fruit, because it won't feel right at first. And you also run the consequence that if you're not doing those levels of volume, your muscles might begin to look a little bit deflated, which can happen, right? Because you're no longer now stimulating the sarcoplasmic hypertrophy that's going to create the need for more muscle cell fluid and fuel. The muscles are going to get depleted a little bit until you start to get that pump or hit those carbs in a heavy way again, right? You start to look a little bit more depleted some of the time at earlier stages. Eventually you start to normalize. But in the beginning, you're kind of like, I feel like I'm losing my muscle, and especially if you got a lower carbohydrate diet, which we incorporated at the beginning, you can just look a little bit depleted, right? But it comes back. The strength is there. So you got to decide what your metrics are, If it's to look as big and full, as strong all the time, well, you ought to be a bodybuilder. But if it's to be performance ready, you got to trust that arc and say, look, in theory, the stronger that I get, the less work I should be doing. Now, when I do it, it's higher quality work, it's higher intensity work, but the volume should decline. This is critical. So there's a little bit of warrior's philosophy for you, warrior mentality. Let me know if you got any thoughts or questions, guys. It can seem counterintuitive to people that have not trained this or have not studied enough of the biology behind muscle adaptation, high strength performance, etc. So any questions, please drop them in the comments. Until next time, be weightless.